morning, kitty. That hurts. That hurts what you're doing. Are you excited? It's time to paint. Hello, everyone. Today I'm going to do something a little bit different from my usual format and tell you all the story of Ink, my familiar. So to begin this story, we have to go back about 5 years. I was living in Miami at the time, kind of where Little Haiti meets the Upper East Side, and I was living alone for the first time in my adult life. I had this tiny little studio apartment behind a strip club called Wonderland. It wasn't the greatest neighborhood, but it was all I could afford at the time and be able to live alone. And the complex was right on a canal, and my neighbors all had little vegetable gardens, so even though it wasn't the safest neighborhood, it had this great energy for me, and it was the perfect place to kind of reestablish myself at the time. I had just gotten out of a relationship that ended very explosively, and I was in a place where I was regaining my independence and redefining what it was that I wanted out of life. It was kind of right around this time that I started creating art for myself, and I just was reevaluating and redefining what I wanted. And then at some point, I'd maybe been living there about a month and decided that I needed a companion. And I had a very specific idea in mind of what that companion would be. Don't know where the idea came from, but for whatever reason, I felt that I needed a little black boy kitten. I was very set on this idea that I was gonna get a all black boy kitten. I think I generally tend to want black cats just because I know they tend to be discarded more often, and I love them and I want to give them a home. But I had made that decision, and I called my friend Eric, who is an animal lover, and told him that it was time for me to get a kitten, and asked him if he would make plans with me to go to the shelter to find one. And we made plans for the following day, and hung up. So then that night I went to my Aikido training, which is an awesome art form. If you guys have never done it, I highly recommend once in your life just to at least test out Aikido. But then when I got home, there was this little shadow sitting in my parking space, and when I pulled into the parking space, the shadow jumped, and it was a kitten, and it went and decided to sit next to my front door, all while staring at me. He stared at my car, he stared at me when I got out, and then the whole time as I walked up to my front door, and as I approached him, without any hesitation whatsoever, he just rubbed up all over my legs. He was just instantly the most friendly cat, and not like that normal hesitation or skittishness that you get from feral or street cats. This one just went right for me and was sitting right by my front door. So I spent a couple minutes and was petting the kitten and was just taking some time to spend with him. But then at some point I did decide that it was time to go inside my house, or in my apartment, and I unlocked the door, and as soon as I opened my front door, he just waltzed in like he owned the place. Just let himself in, no questions asked, and started roaming around. So, I was a little flabbergasted at that point, but I figured, maybe he's hungry and he's looking for something to eat. So I didn't have any cat food yet, but I fried him up an egg because I figured he would go for that. And I set it on the floor, and while he was eating it, I decided to lay down on my couch and I guess scroll Facebook or something. And then as soon as he finished eating, he walked over, jumped on the couch, and just stretched his whole body across my stomach, and the longest way possible, and with his feet dangling off the couch, and passed out cold. I have never seen a cat pass out so dead before, just like completely passed out. Just he was so comfortable immediately. So while I was pinned under this random kitten, I called my friend and said, hey, so I think I need to cancel our plans tomorrow. And this is gonna sound crazy, but there's already this little shadow cat sleeping on me right now. He was just waiting by my door when I got home. So I decided to keep him and not go to the shelter. And of course, upon further inspection, he was an all black boy kitten. Literally the exact idea that I had in mind for adoption. And just, the night before I was gonna go, just showed up on my doorstep. I can't even explain that as a coincidence, and I don't know if I could even call that a coincidence. Because it was right at this point in my life where I was putting out the energy of and kind of building the intention of what I wanted, and here came, I made this decision. I made the decision out loud. I made plans with someone else to do it, and here came that exact thing, this exact companion that I had hoped for, just literally showed up on my doorstep. So, of course, I kept him. And I decided to name him Inkubus Quilliam Yates, and we called him Ink for short. And we spent 5 amazing years together, me and this cat, my familiar. We moved from that little apartment in the Upper East Side, Little Haiti area to another 3rd-story apartment in Little Havana, where he got to meet other cats and be socialized, and was great. And then from there, we moved into a house that had a big yard, and where he got to meet dogs, and he just had the greatest demeanor. Like, he got along with everything. I mean, he wasn't always friendly, but he was never mean, and he never had any issues. He was just like so go with the flow, but also very independent in who he was. If he liked you, he liked you. If he didn't, he stayed away, but he was never mean, and I totally appreciated that about him. So we lived there for a while, and while he was there, he learned to be an indoor-outdoor cat, which was great because he got to go out and explore the world, and I didn't have to keep a litter box, so that was great. And then we were there for less than a year before we decided to do the big move when we moved here to our house in a forest in the mountains of Georgia. So he did that big move with us, 12 hours in the car on his little kitty leash, and he was great. And then, once we moved here, he really lived his best life. He was still indoor-outdoor, and he had these woods that he could roam, and just, you could tell he was the happiest he had ever been. And he got to experience seasons for the first time, and I would go out and I would see him catching the falling leaves and just totally loving our new home. And I'm just so happy that the last few years with him were so full of joy. He was just so much my familiar. He would come when I called, I would go outside and call his name, and he'd instantly come to me no matter where he was in the woods. He could be, all the way up the mountain several blocks away, and I would hear him bursting through the leaves to come to me when I called him. I could have full conversations with him, and he would understand me and do as I asked of him. It was like completely insane. There's so much intelligence and depth and understanding to him. And it was only with me, it wasn't something like him and my boyfriend did not have this relationship. It was just a specific thing that him and I had. And, he would share my pillow every night, except on nights where there was a full moon, because those are nights when he wanted to go out and stay all night in the woods and enjoy the lit up nighttime. And I was totally okay with it. It always made me a little nervous that he wanted to stay out so long, but it was, his decision, because I really felt that he was very cognizant and was able to make his own decisions. It wasn't, I didn't feel like I was his owner and he was my ward. It was more that we were friends and he made his decisions and I made mine and we cohabitated together. And it was like that from the get-go. It was never a moment of I won you over and now you're my cat. It was just he chose me and I chose him, and we coexisted together wonderfully for 5 years. And honestly, guys, he was my biggest fan. It was insane. He would always be so excited when I painted. If he saw me in my studio, he would run and jump on my lap and start purring, because he was always just so happy to see me paint or to be with me while I paint. And I don't know if he just got off on the energy that I exude when I'm painting, that happiness and that thrill. But he was my biggest fan. And even when I wasn't painting, he would come find me in the house and meow at me and beckon me to follow him and like lead me into the studio and just be like, let's be in here, let's do this. And honestly, he was one of my biggest motivators. I can't even, as I say this stuff out loud, I know it sounds a little nuts or a little impossible, but and I probably would not buy into this story if it didn't happen directly to me. But he was such an intelligent being and beyond any other cat I'd ever met. And I've had cats my whole life. Him specifically was just beyond, or at least our connection was beyond. And I always joked that he was my cosmic kitty, because I like put out into the universe that I wanted this specific creature as a companion, and he came to me. He quite literally showed up on my doorstep. It was just pure magic. He was just pure magic, and he brought so much magic into my life in a time when I really needed it. The night that Ink died, I was in Atlanta on business, and I was in this hotel room, and I was having the worst sleep of my life. I had nightmares all night of just rescuing animals. Like, animals were in danger, and I had to save them, but it was almost impossible, and I was frantically running around trying to save animals, to save all the creatures, and I couldn't. And then I'd wake up and I'd be in this hotel room and be gasping for breath, and I didn't know what was going on. And then I would try to sleep again, and I'd go right back into these nightmares about trying to save animals. And I had no idea that at the time Ink was being passing on to another realm. And it makes sense now that I had nightmares all night that he died, but at the time I had no idea. And while I was in Atlanta, my boyfriend found him, and I feel so bad because he was not in good shape. He died on Beltane, and I guess wanted to stay out and celebrate the holiday, and was basking in the moonlight on the street, which was always my biggest fear in letting him be so independent and make his own decisions. But that was his choice, and maybe he decided it was his time to go. I have no idea. But my boyfriend found him and did not immediately tell me, because he knew I had to drive back from Atlanta, and that was a good decision, because I never ever would have made that drive knowing that. And when I got home, my boyfriend was at work, but everything felt wrong. I couldn't get a hold of my boyfriend because he was at work, and I couldn't find Ink. I just felt like, what's wrong? And after a few hours of him not coming home, I knew something horrible had happened to him. I could feel that he wasn't around. His energy been missing. Like there was a total void where he should have been, and the house just felt empty, and I didn't know for sure what happened. But my boyfriend got home that night, and I just looked at him, and I knew, and I said, Ink died, didn't he? And my boyfriend could barely tell me because he knew it was devastating news. But yes, he did die that night, and we buried him in the backyard, and I created a little Shinto shrine for him. I planted a Crepe Myrtle over his grave so that he could grow into being a part of the forest that he roamed and loved for 2 years. And then I found this gorgeous little ceramic house that I put at the base of the Crepe Myrtle with a couple little ceramic mushrooms, so that he had a lovely little place for his spirit to roam, and he had a home to live in the forest that would be cozy, that I could go visit him at. The biggest reason I wanted to share this story with you is because I don't think I've ever experienced a loss as difficult as the loss of my familiar, my pet, my cat. The loss of Ink was easily the most difficult loss or death that I've ever had to deal with, and I don't want anybody to feel like they should diminish the losses of their pets or of their furry babies, because sometimes they're harder than losing a human in your life. It's really tough, and it took me a while to get to a place where I feel comfortable again. I'll always miss him, but right now I am settled in the idea that, or in the feeling that I'm just grateful that we spent any time together. You know, he came into my life like a bat out of hell almost. Just showed up one day as I called for him, and left in a very similar manner, just on Beltane. Like it was just, time to go, and I will always miss him, but I will also forever be grateful to have had that amazing connection, and I hope that wherever his spirit ends up, he finds happiness, and that somehow we stay connected in some way or another. So that's my story, guys. This painting will not be for sale for obvious reasons, but I will be putting prints up on my website. And if you have a pet that you want to commission a portrait of, I am really feeling the pet commissions right now. So hit me up. Everybody have a wonderful day. Give your fur babies the biggest hug for me, because they disappear sometimes, and it's unexpected, and it's jolting, and it sucks. So make sure you give them a bunch of extra love for me today. Bye!